Good morning, friends. All of you who are right here in the room, anybody who might be watching from any place else in the world, whether that is across town here or in the wilds of Evansville, Indiana, as you weed flowers. We're glad to have you here with us. We're going to pick up at Acts chapter 19, where we left off the last time. I made a mark at Acts 19, verse 23. Do you agree? Wild enthusiasm. Acts 19, verse 23 says, about that time, there arose a great disturbance about the way. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in a lot of business for the craftsmen there. He called them together along with the workers in related trades and said, you know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are not gods at all. There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. When they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Soon the whole city was in an uproar. The people seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and all of them rushed into the theater together. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander to the front, and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people. But when they realized he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for about 2 hours, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. The city clerk quieted the crowd and said, fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. They can press charges. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what happened today. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion since there is no reason for it. After he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. Does anything strike you? Anything jump out at you about this interesting situation?
That stone that fell from the sky is really interesting. Urged Paul not to go in. Even people that were part of the crowd but were friends of him. Because I guess they knew he wouldn't fare very well. But the thing that I snorted at was some did not know what reason they had come together. Now you know when it started, and it's still going.
The same way it is today, though.
Yep.
You got
Yeah.
writing going on. Some people don't even know what they're writing.
I was going to say,
That's exactly.
things don't change.
No.
There's a riot going on and people are there who got no clue. They're in the last block, but no idea.
Some people.
Maybe it's just as vital today as it ever has been, because human nature doesn't change.
Yeah, well, I didn't know they believed in goddesses. Thought Jews were part of the, I mean, of the stories of the Old Testament. I don't remember, not that much astute to all of it by any means, but I remember goddesses being mentioned.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that goddess. So you may have heard the name Artemis before. Somebody who is in the Greek pantheon of gods. But this particular Artemis is a little different. She is older and comes from someplace else. So in the text it mentions that she is worshipped in Ephesus, but in the rest of Asia and even into the rest of the world, it is likely that that this particular goddess has come from the east, like far beyond what we would call Turkey, and that Ephesus is probably like the furthest western extent of her worshippers. There is her name was Artemis, but the Greeks also had a goddess named Artemis. The Ephesian Artemis is a huntress, and lots of statues. She's got a bow and her dog with her. The Greek version, she is a little different. And without going into lots of um, graphic detail, her physical presentation is different. Um, the people who study such things don't know if uh, exactly what all of the extra sculpture is on the statues of Artemis. If it is something to do with fertility or motherhood or something else, but she would have had a hard time going to JCPenney's to get close, I'll just say. um, the Ephesians were really well known in the world for their devotion to this particular goddess Artemis. She is connected to birth and life and death. The Ephesians are also well known for the temple that was built to honor her. It was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It was a massive building, considerably bigger than the Parthenon in Athens. It was made of solid marble, 5 stories tall, so at least 50 feet tall. It was decorated with very ornate carvings and sculptures. It was adorned with silver and gold, and the altar to Artemis was large enough to sacrifice hundreds of animals simultaneously. So this is a big deal. Um, you know, bigger than a football field, just a massive, massive structure. Part of the worship of Artemis was lots of little idols, little statues made of Artemis in silver. So the silversmiths there are pretty well known because they're always busy all the time because people would come from all over Asia to worship at this temple of Artemis. And that they made a pretty good living making these little house idols to take home, but also to make the larger idols to cover things with silver and gold in the temple and in the shrines all over the city. So the silversmiths were pretty busy and fairly successful, wealthy businessmen. And that's the problem. All these Gentile Asians are worshiping this goddess of hunting and fertility and motherhood and life and death. Everybody, I mean, it would be like being in Jerusalem and worshiping the God of Israel. I mean, it's the center for that. Everything revolves around that, and so for Paul to come in and say, there is a God who created everything. And, to give the whole story about Jesus, to give the whole story about God's plan for the world. This is absolutely contrary to everything that goes on in Ephesus. It's one thing if it's one guy who comes in, does a little preaching, and he gets a few followers, and it's not that big of a deal. But when it starts eating into people's pocketbooks, now we've got a problem, because Paul has apparently been successful in Ephesus. What is it that Demetrius says? He says that gods made by human hands are not gods at all. He has led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. So Paul has been everywhere. He has taught and preached everywhere, and he has had great success everywhere that he has gone. And folks in Ephesus are aware of that. They know about the success of Paul's ministry and his teaching, and they're not huge fans of what that's going to mean for their bottom line at the end of the year. Yes, Robert.
Two things, so that verse 20 says, so the word of the Lord continues to increase and prevail mightily in Ephesus. That was just something I noticed when you were saying that he was successful. Is the Ephesian goddess Artemis recorded in history outside of the Bible, in secular history? Do you know?
I believe so. And that's how they would know that she comes from someplace else. I can't remember. I can't remember. I didn't write it down, but it's somewhere way over east, and it is just sort of migrated farther and farther to the west.
I just have a question. I don't know if it has anything to do with anything specific, but when you were talking about they went to worship the temple, they bring all these animals in. Do they have any of the way they did it? Is there any similarity the way that the Jewish people did their sacrifices when they went and brought the animals? I was just curious. Do you know?
Probably in the absolute basics of it, yeah, that you would bring your animal. Now, an Asian Greek world sacrifice might be different than a Jewish sacrifice. Jewish sacrifice is very limited. You're bringing a bull, you're bringing a ram, you're bringing a lamb, you're bringing a goat, a pigeon, and it's pretty well laid out that it's really just a handful of things that you can bring as a sacrifice. I don't know that the Greeks would have had a similar code. They may have.
Like how they did the animals.
But yeah, they're gonna do a lot of the same kinds of things. They're gonna bring the animal up. They're going to to kill it, they will throw it in pieces onto the fire, or at least representative pieces onto the fire. Because one of the things that we'll read, that we do read later in the New Testament, when Paul is writing to various churches, he talks about eating meat that has been sacrificed to idols. So they would bring, we'll go with something easy. They bring a bull to be sacrificed. They would kill the animal. Probably the most mystical spiritual parts of the animal would be offered on the fire. Maybe the heart, maybe the liver, some of those internal organs would be thrown onto the fire as a sacrifice, and then the meat would be it's also sort of offered to the god or goddess, but then it's also eaten by the worshipers or taken to the marketplace and sold. And so that was one of the questions for a Christian living in one of these places where there's all this ritual sacrifice going on. Can we eat meat that has been sacrificed to an idol? Well, it doesn't mean anything to you. You bought it at the market. You should eat it. But if you're going to be with somebody for whom that's going to be a problem, then don't do it. So, but as far as killing the animal, bleeding the animal, offering it up on the fire, putting it into manageable, marketable pieces, probably a lot of that is similar. Because in the Old Testament, the priests' families, the Levites' families were fed through the sacrificial system. Now they would take I won't give the whole list. The part that sticks out with me, and every time they talk about a sacrifice, is the long lobe of the liver and the fat around the kidneys. Those would be offered onto the fire along with some other things. But then the rest of the carcass would be given to the tribe of Levi for food. How's that for dancing around your answer?
It's good.
That's good.
It's kind of the same.
That I find interesting, in this whole, text is, it all starts with greed of these businessmen. And, they know, or at least I think they know, that's not gonna translate very well. You're not gonna get a lot of support because of your greed. So they turn it into, it's an attack on our goddess.
It's all about the spin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's the same thing that happens today. Yeah, our leaders do that all the time. It's a greed issue for them. Maybe it's power, maybe it's money, something, and then they just get something that strikes a chord.
Yeah, they go right to, I guess it would probably be pride, national pride or religious pride. We've got this amazing temple that is unparalleled in the ancient world. We worship this goddess who fell down from heaven. She is known far and wide. And can you believe that these clowns have come in here and said she's not even a god at all? How do we feel about that? I mean, it would, I suppose, I always fear to tread on political ice, but it's kind of like Christian nationalism, except it's not Christian. It's Artemis nationalism. Can you believe they're going to come in here and do this? That is, fellas, that is not right. We got to run these interlopers out of here and get them out of town. They're challenging our Ephesian way of life, down to the very basics, who we worship. But it's because they don't want to lose money. Much more than their devotion to the goddess. Well, let's see.
I was searching where. And she was actually one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And it was a really big deal. Way east of Athens, across the ocean.
Yes, across the Aegean, at least a couple
Yeah.
of days sail or more, depending on wind and weather and things. But her origin is probably even farther east than that. And so you've got Greeks who are worshiping Zeus and Apollo and Hermes and all those things that Hercules, all those Greek myths that you read. In Asia, they have some of the same gods because it was a part of the Greek Empire under what's his bucket? Under Alexander the Great. He would be appalled that I called him that. And then, you go on around the Mediterranean, get to the Jews who are only worshiping one God. Do they always understand that? Sometimes really, yes, sometimes not so much, but they're worshiping the one God, the creator of the universe. And you've got the Christians who are worshiping that same God who was revealed in Jesus. So, there's a lot of worshiping going on all around the Mediterranean world, but it is all very, very different in most ways. There are similarities, but there's a lot of differences. For a Jew or a Christian, if you want to ask God for a good harvest, you talk to God about a good harvest, or success in battle, or health in your family. If you're a Greek or a Roman or somebody from, some other nation around, you got to figure out now who's the goddess that I talk to about this. It's like,
Extension.
yeah, exactly. Which extension, which floor is their office on when you go to the hospital directory? No, who do we need to talk to here for a Jew or Christian? It's all just the same, just one. Two of Paul's companions get caught up in the riot. Gaius and Aristarchus. They get taken to the city theater. I have a picture, I can show you that in a little bit. Gaius is from Macedonia. Macedonia is the part above Greece. This northern part up on the edge of the Aegean. This is Achaia. This is Macedonia. Gaius has come from up there around Philippi or Thessalonica, maybe Berea, up in the north. There are 2 or 3 other men that have that same first name in Scripture. One of them comes from Corinth, which we'll read about later today. There is one from Derbe, and another one from someplace else that John writes to. We read about Aristarchus a few more times in the book of Acts. His name will keep coming up, but he's also mentioned by name in Colossians 4:10. Paul says there that Aristarchus is his fellow prisoner or fellow captive. And in Philemon 1:24, Paul refers to him along with Mark and Luke and Demas as a fellow worker. So he is a solid companion of the Apostle Paul. He goes on lots of journeys with him, and a longtime companion, like Timothy or Silas or Luke. But that's kind of funny. We don't hear his name very much. We know a lot about Luke, we know a lot about Timothy, we know a lot about Silas, but Aristarchus is there almost as often. When the last time you met somebody named Aristarchus? So The people of the city have gathered into the theater of Ephesus, which was a huge amphitheater that could hold 25,000 spectators for things like plays, speeches, and fights. And they get together for 2 hours and shout the same thing over and over again. In Greek, it sounds like this: Megale he Artemis Ephesion. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So that goes on. I'm confident that nobody is having a really great time. Gaius, Aristarchus, who are there, held in place. But I'm assuming it is loud enough, and that the acoustics work the way they do in a theater on purpose, that noise can be heard a long way away. And wherever Paul happens to be, trying to get to the door so he can go, he's not allowed to, because they know that things are going to go badly. The disciples hold him back. Maybe he's back behind the building somewhere, so because you'd have this big half of a bowl, and then an open area with some kind of a stage, but there'd be like 2 or 3 stories of building behind it. So maybe they're stuck back in one of those rooms. Some kind of an official from Ephesus goes to the theater and does his best to calm the crowd down, and he makes this nice speech, but the point of it is, look, if there are legal complaints against these men, they should be handled legally. If Demetrius really wants to file a suit, he should do that. We're going to be in trouble with the empire if we keep on doing this. We should all go home now. And so everybody leaves. Like that's a powerful guy right there. That's a good speech. He's able to get everybody under control. Apparently, the threat of the Roman army coming in and putting it to rest is not attractive to them at all. So we said a week or two ago that Paul wrote his first letter to the Corinthians during the middle of his 2 years in Ephesus. Before he leaves the city of Ephesus, he is going to write a second letter to them. It's what we call the second letter to the Corinthians. There might actually be another one in the middle there that we don't have. But in that letter, he says that Timothy is with him. And in 2 Corinthians 1:8, he mentions his troubles in Asia. Being the focus of a citywide riot seems like troubles is maybe underselling that a little bit. The opening paragraphs of 2 Corinthians also focus on finding comfort in God, something that Paul must have experienced during his battles with the idol worshiping Ephesians. In 2 Corinthians 1:8, the rest of the verse says, "We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself." What's Paul saying?
We feared for our lives.
We feared for our lives, or we wished that we were dead. Somewhere in the middle there. A great deal of pressure. And then in the following, he says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. The time in Ephesus has been difficult. It has been fairly stressful, draining, tumultuous. Paul has felt like he is surrounded and doesn't know what to do except to keep on doing the same thing. If you go to chapter 4 in 2 Corinthians, he gives some strong words down in verse 17 and 18. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Even though they have despaired of life itself while they've been in Ephesus, they recognize that there is still hope because of Jesus. Despair always gives way to hope because of Christ Jesus. And there's probably some encouragement there for us on what to do in the midst of overwhelming opposition or great difficulty. Do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. All the stuff that you can see is temporary. All the stuff that you cannot see is eternal. So focus on the eternal.
Scriptures.
That is 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. Light and momentary troubles. Even though he has said earlier that we despaired of life itself, by the time he gets to chapter 4, he can look at them with a different perspective and say, in the scope of the universe, they're really not all that bad.
It's in good shape for the shape he's in.
Yeah, exactly. And it is after this event that Paul decides to leave Ephesus, and that would bring us to the end of chapter 19. Any deep thoughts, probing questions, rebuttal?
Do you have an idea who was in the theater? The makeup of the people?
Anybody from Ephesus. So it's going to be Demetrius and all of his silversmith cronies, and everybody who's selling the great is Artemis of the Ephesians t-shirts and banners and stickers and
So probably not Jews.
probably not Jews, which is one of the reasons why when they bring this Jewish man Alexander up, I don't know why they bring him. Apparently he has some kind of influence in the city, maybe, or he's well known. Maybe he just has a big loud voice. I don't know. We don't really have that detail. But as soon as they figure out he's a Jew, what do they start again? Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Great is Artemis. It just drowns him out. Because they know that the Jews got one God as well, and it's not Artemis.
And some who didn't even know why they were there.
And some who are just there who got caught up in the crowd. Is it a parade? I don't know. Maybe there'll be snacks.
Let's go see what's up.
Or have somebody sign and start.
Coke and popcorn.
There was a current thing that happened just real quick. It's just like this. There was people in New York were protesting, holding signs that said, "From the rivers to the seas, Palestine will be free." And I thought, they don't know even what they don't have a clue what they're even talking about. 2 rivers, and there's not 2 seas, and yet they're carrying these signs that say "from the rivers to the seas." It was just like a sure sign that they're bandwagoning.
Here,
Like
ten
this.
bucks, carry this sign.
Yeah.
Yes, Marlene.
In my translation, it says this, also some of the Is it AZ Arcs? What is that? Or what are they?
Asiarchs.
Yeah,
An arc is going to be somebody who's an official or a ruler of some kind.
Yeah, mine says that with the definition of high-ranking officers of the province in Asia.
Monarch, oligarch, politarch, asiarch.
They were friends of Paul, some of them.
Yeah. He had been there long enough and had done enough good things that there were people who appreciated what he was doing and had befriended him. Maybe they are even a part of the Ephesian church.
Did this all happen in the course of a single day?
That's the impression that I have. That Demetrius has had enough. You know, he wakes up on a Tuesday morning and profits are down, looks at the books, realizes what's going on. He blames Paul and the Christians for undercutting his sales, goes down the street, gathers all the other shop owners and says, this can't happen. Whips everybody into a froth. They find Gaius and Aristarchus. I'm assuming wherever it is that the Ephesian church is regularly meeting, that would have been well known probably to everyone. Whether that is outside the Ephesian synagogue or what was that school we talked about before? The lecture hall of Tyrannus. They go down, they grab these two guys who are just companions of Paul, take them to the theater. So I believe this is all in the course of one long miserable day for the believers.
Are you thinking about where it says the Asiarchs sent word?
Yeah.
I stuck on the same thing, but then I thought, well, their office could have been 2 blocks away or 3 blocks away, and they just
Yeah, it
Told
seems weird.
told their secretary, hey, go tell Paul, don't go in there.
Yeah.
Ephesus was a large city. I mean, it covers a lot of territory, from the harbor all the way up the hill, kind of across the valley. When we see the pictures, you'll get a little bit better idea of the scope. But you know, it's tens of thousands of people that live in the city. So if the city officials are in one place, it might take them a half an hour to get to where Paul is to say, don't you dare go out there. Do not go outside.
But from reading where we've got so far, my first read of that was, well, they were 3 days away by foot. This inward 3 days and to walk. And then I thought, well, they're probably right.
It is possible
Up the hill or
that
right
it went on for a while, that this takes place over a few days. But there's, other than the 2 hours that they're chanting, there's really no day or time stamps in it. In the movie, it's all in one day. From the time the shop opens at 9 in the morning until everybody scurries back to their rooms, in the evening, because the Romans are going to show up and put us all in jail if we don't knock it off. Chapter 20, verse 1. When the uproar had ended, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them, said goodbye and set out for Macedonia. He traveled through that area, speaking many words of encouragement to the people, and finally arrived in Greece, where he stayed 3 months. Because some Jews had plotted against him just as he was about to sail for Syria, he decided to go back through Macedonia. He was accompanied by Sopater, son of Pyrrhus from Berea, Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, Gaius from Derbe, a different Gaius, Timothy also, and Tychicus and Trophimus from the province of Asia. These men went on ahead and waited for us at Troas, but we sailed from Philippi after the festival of unleavened bread, and 5 days later joined the others at Troas, where we stayed 7 days. So, after the hullabaloo in theater, which Paul didn't really ever even see with his own eyes, he wasn't at the theater. He determines that maybe it would be better if we were to leave Ephesus, let things cool off for a little bit. There are other places where we can do ministry where we won't have this kind of opposition. So, where does he decide to go? He's going
Greece.
to Macedonia. Again, Ephesus is here. He's gonna get on a boat and he's gonna sail probably over to Neapolis to get into Philippi, into Macedonia. He's going to be it's eventually going to end up in Corinth, down in Achaia, and he's going to be in Corinth for 3 months. It is likely that he writes the letter to the Romans from Corinth. Instead of sailing on to Judea from Corinth, he goes back to Macedonia first, to avoid some conflict, but we're kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves just a bit.
So my chapter 2 says he came to Greece. Would that be Corinth?
Greece, oh, see, there's a note about that someplace in all this mess. At least there was. Oh, yeah, duh, it's right there. So he writes in, it says in Greece, this is the one time that the name Greece is used in scripture. In Greek, how do I even do that? In Greek, Greece is Ellas, Ellas, which is where they get words like Hellenistic or Hellenizing. You're making it like Greece. This is the only time that word is used in the New Testament to refer to this place. Usually it is by the term Achaia. So he'll spend 3 months there this time before he goes back to Syria, back to Antioch of Syria. Okay, he wants to be here. This is all part of Syria. He is over here. But rather than getting on a boat in Corinth and sailing either one way or the other out of Corinth, he's going to go back up through Macedonia one more time. We get a list of his traveling companions. Sopater from Berea, Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, Gaius from Derbe, Timothy from Lystra, Tychicus is from Asia, and as well as Trophimus. We read about both of those guys in a number of other places in Paul's letters. We read about Tychicus in Ephesians 6, Colossians 4, 2 Timothy 4, and Titus 3. He's with Paul a lot. And Trophimus we read about in the next chapter, and then again in 2 Timothy chapter 4. These two guys, Tychicus and Trophimus, are probably, the guess is probably from Ephesus, since that's where they have, where Paul has been the most recently in Asia. Now, I don't know if you're paying attention there, but they come from every place. So you got Sopater from Berea. You've got, who's from Thessalonica?
Secundus.
Secundus and
Aristarchus.
Aristarchus from Thessalonica. You've got Gaius from Derbe, which is here in Turkey. You've got Timothy, who is from Lystra. He's been with Paul for ages. And then you've got these last two guys, Tychicus and Trophimus, who are from somewhere in Asia, but the guess is Ephesus. So every place he has gone, he has picked up somebody from town. And it's probably not until a little bit later that we understand why these men have come along with Paul, but it has to do with the collection that he has been gathering for the believers in Judea and Jerusalem. So every place he goes, they take up a collection, whether that is just of money or of supplies, and then some deacon from that church, some man from that church goes along to carry that congregation's gift. And so they will likely go with Paul from place to place, picking up one more guy all the way along as they take all these supplies and offerings to Jerusalem. Paul is going to Jerusalem specifically to take a collection for the poor there. During the 3 months in Greece or Achaia, it's likely that Paul writes the letter to the Romans. At the end of the letter, if you want to go to like Romans chapter 15 and 16, especially chapter 16, he does all these greetings. It's like a whole chapter of, and he says hi, she says hi. Be sure to give a big hug to. That's kind of the last chapter. Not great for memorizing, but it makes it very personal. At the end of the letter, he sends greetings along from Gaius, and he says, whose hospitality he and the whole church enjoy, and Erastus, the city's director of public works from Corinth. We've read about Gaius from Corinth before. We have talked about Erastus from Corinth before as well. Paul is probably staying with Gaius in Corinth at a minimum, or that Gaius hosts the church in his home there in the city. It is likely that he's the same Gaius that Paul writes about baptizing in 1 Corinthians chapter 1:14, along with Crispus, who is the synagogue ruler. You may remember that from a couple of sessions ago. Paul tells the Romans that he wants to visit the city. He has wanted to do so for some time, and he will plan to do so on his way to Spain. That is Romans chapter 15, verses 23 and 24, where he talks about that. We just said the name Greece, Hellas, is mentioned only once in the New Testament, but the name for Spain is only mentioned like that twice in the New Testament, in Romans 15:24 and 28. So it's in the same chapter. Outside of that, we don't read the name Spain. But that is Paul's plan. He wants to go as soon as he can get all of his other travels taken care of. He's going to drop this thing off in Jerusalem. His goal is to go all the way to the end of the world, to Spain, to do teaching and preaching there as well. And at the time, he is heading towards Jerusalem to deliver these contributions that have come from the Macedonians and the Achaeans for the poor. We read that in 15 and 16.
Is there any knowledge of how many years the book of Acts covers?
Well, if it picks up with the resurrection of Jesus, that starts probably, depending on which scholars you believe, sometime around 30 or 33 AD. This is probably the mid to late 50s. And there's, time-wise, there's not a lot more years that go on. So maybe a span of about 30 years from beginning to end.
So Paul could realistically be 50 to 60 years old at the end of Acts.
Sure. We've made reference to in verse 6, we sailed from Philippi after the festival of unleavened bread. The annual feast of unleavened bread, we talked about in our Life of Jesus study. But it is a 7-day long festival that takes place immediately after Passover. Jews celebrate it even in Macedonia, in Philippi, and Paul does so with them. I'm sure you know, but in Philippi, there's not a synagogue. Paul was meeting with the Jewish families down by the river. And so there are enough Jewish families there that he wants to celebrate Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread with them. That seems like kind of a very personal kind of touch for Paul. We get the idea that he's running roughshod from town to town, preaching the message and moving on. But the decision to stay in Philippi and to celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread with them for a week, that really kind of seems like a great big pause in his stuff.
It's kind of similar to Mary and Martha.
Yeah, I mean, you're just
extra friendship of sorts.
Yeah, you're taking time to sit down and not just to be preaching, baptizing people all the time, but we're gonna celebrate this important festival together. Passover and the Festival of Unleavened Bread is all about what God did for the Israelites in Egypt. There were the 10 plagues. God told the Israelites to paint the blood of the lamb over the lamb over the doorpost and the lintel, and the death angel would pass over that house. It wouldn't come in and kill the firstborn. They had to be standing, eating their meal. There's no time to let the bread rise. There's no yeast. We're eating flatbread and roasted lamb, and we got to have the suitcase packed by the door. Where God is getting us out of here tonight. And so that's what Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are all about, is remembering that freedom from bondage, physical bondage in Egypt. And I have to believe that with Paul, for him to celebrate Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread with these Jewish families who have, we don't know, I would assume, have come to believe in Jesus because he's with them. That now that they understand that Jesus is the Passover lamb, and in the shedding of his blood that makes it possible for death to pass over them, that they're released from the captivity of temptation and sin and death. They have a whole new life in a promised land, eternally with God forever. I gotta believe that Paul has connected all those dots for them. So it seems like this is a very it doesn't get a lot of airtime or scroll time here for Luke to write it down. But if you think about what it means, Paul is doing some resting and some refreshing, some worshiping with these fellow countrymen, and we would assume believers in Jesus as well.
Can you repeat that?
Absolutely. It's available on YouTube in about an hour. Even the great apostle Paul takes time to celebrate and to remember significant spiritual events. It's not all about the next service and the next sermon, which probably will help there for pastors.
That was very nicely said. Thank you. The whole thing.
As soon as the Feast of Unleavened Bread is over, Paul will join his companions in the port of Troas. He has sent them on ahead, but he's going to hang out in Philippi. Usually is a 2-day journey across the Aegean by boat, but this trip, Luke tells us, takes 5 days. So there must be some wind, or maybe there's some weather. Usually a trip from Philippi and Neapolis across to Troas would include a stop at an island in the middle, Samothrace. But there's no record of that. Maybe they got stuck there for a couple of days. Somebody couldn't find their passport. I don't know, promise. But it takes a little bit longer than usual. But they're heading to Troas. And that brings us to Acts 20, verse 7. Should I blast ahead with that? Okay, I got 1.5 more good pages. I think it's worth it. So Acts 20, verse 7. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, kept on talking until midnight. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the 3rd story and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him. "Don't be alarmed," he said, "he is alive." Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, he left. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted. Verse 7 might seem like a throwaway calendar item, but we have placed some special significance on Acts 20, verse 7. Okay, first, we should notice that there is a change in the pronouns. It's no longer he and they, but now it's we again. So Luke has been in Troas while Paul has been skipping all over Macedonia and Achaia, and now they've been reunited again. So it is the first day of the week, Sunday, and there is a gathering to break bread. So at a minimum, this group is Paul and Luke and all those other men that we mentioned earlier, Sopater and Tychicus and Trophimus and the rest of those people. But it may also be whatever kind of church following there may be in Troas as well. I have always believed that that was the case, that it was a gathering of believers from Troas, as well as Paul and his group. Um, uh, we find this passage to be instructive about worship. The believers were meeting on the first day of the week, Sunday, the Lord's Day. I learned something I did not know when I was getting ready this week for this study, that Jews did not have names for days of the week other than the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was every week, and you marked your time with either before or after the Sabbath. It's one day before the Sabbath. It was 2 days after the Sabbath. Man, that seems complicated. Why not just give it a name? But that's how they operated. The Greeks and Romans, though, actually had names for the days of the week, and for the first day of the week for Greek is the Hemera day of Helios, the sun in the sky. Hemera Helios. And in Greek writing, that's how they referred to that day, Hemera Helios, all the time. But once the Christians come in and began to have influence, the name of the day shifts to Hemera Kyriakos, which is the day of the Lord. And in modern Greek, the name of that day is just Kyriaka, the Lord. I just think that's interesting that, 2,000 years later, the effect of the Christians is evident in the Greek calendar. And actually, if you look at other languages, it's similar, that the first day of the week has something to do with God in some way. So
the appropriate way to spell it would be SON day,
yes, it is the Lord's Day.
Sunday.
So Paul and Luke and the traveling group and whatever, I don't know what you are if you're from Troas, a Troatian? Sure. The Troatian Christians are all gathered together on this first day of the week. Paul knows he's only going to be in Troas for a day. He sailed in, he finds this group of people. He plans to leave the following morning to head the rest of the way to Judea with his group to deliver these gifts. So that's kind of the setting. What we also learn about these early church gatherings is that there is teaching and preaching. There is a plan for the breaking of bread. There's also, if you go to places like 1 Corinthians 16, Paul tells the Corinthians, do what I told the Galatian churches to do on the first day of every week. Each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. So we have teaching, collection of offerings in the first century services, breaking bread as a part of their gathering as well. Now, that phrase, breaking of bread, can mean two things. If it's typically writing just about breaking of bread, it's often a meal, whether that is like a family meal in a home, or what are referred to as a love feast. a potluck dinner where everybody brings something in. That's pretty common. But often it is the breaking of bread, which would refer specifically to the Lord's Supper. In most worship services in Paul's time, both are going to be occurring all the time. And they're going to eat together, and then they're also going to, as a part of that meal, remember the Lord's Last Supper with the disciples. Breaking of bread in Acts 2:42, where it says that they met together daily in the temple courts, for the apostles' teaching, for the fellowship, for the breaking of bread and prayer. That would be the Lord's Supper, and it applies here as well. So there is at a minimum, a weekly reminder of Christ's death and resurrection on Sunday. We're observing the Lord's Supper at least on the first day of the week when the church gets together for everything else. So that is one of the reasons why here we still continue to observe the Lord's Supper every Sunday. It's good enough for the Troasians. It's good enough for us as well.
There's a lot of people that debate the first day of the week, Saturday, or the Sabbath.
Would you like to hear the next paragraph, Robert? Will anyone challenge whose weekly calendar Luke is referring to?
I'm just wondering, does it really matter?
Probably not very much. The fact that it occurs is more important than when it occurs. Jewish days started on the evening. So for them, the first day of the week would really start on Saturday evening at sundown. And it would go, the first day of the week would go from then through sundown on Sunday. Roman days started in the morning. So if you're reading this story specifically, they're gathering on the first day of the week. If it's a Jewish understanding, they're getting together starting on Saturday evening. Paul is talking long into the night, till well after midnight. He's planning to leave the next day. If it is a Roman or Greek understanding, they got together first thing in the morning, and Paul has had all day to keep on talking. No wonder after being together all day long, that there's people falling asleep. It's hard enough in a 25-minute sermon to keep people from dozing off, let alone all afternoon. So, Paul talks for a long time because he knows he's leaving. And it is not clear that he is going to see these people again. So in football coach parlance, we say, we're going to leave it all on the field. We're not holding anything back. If there's anything that we think of that comes to our mind that they need to know, we're going to say it. So I hope somebody's taking notes. This is the last chance. I'm not thinking I'm going to be back here. We may never see each other again. I want to make sure you have everything that you're going to need about everything, about Jesus, about baptism, about the Holy Spirit, about communion, about how you organize the church, how you collect an offering, how you treat one another, how you pray for everything, soup to nuts. Paul is, he's got his PowerPoint presentation. He's going through all of it there for them. So this is either a long session or a really long session. There is a young man named Eutychus. A young man would be somebody between 24 and 40. So it's not like he's a kid from the youth group who's just too tired. He's a grown man, but a younger man. He's sitting in the windowsill, listening to Paul preach. There's probably some good breeze there or something. I would assume that it is warm, because Luke makes a comment specifically about there were a lot of lamps, or you might have torches in the room. That always makes things hotter. You go into a room where the only light you have on is a bunch of candles in the room. It warms up. It doesn't take long. So exhaustion from the day, the fatigue of listening to somebody's voice over and over again for hours. Everything is warm. You're sitting by the open window, and the next thing you know, Eutychus has fallen head over heels out the window from the third story onto the hard floor below. I can hear my wife in the room when that happens. Everybody does that. They jump up, they run to the window, there's crying, they're yelling, Poor Eutychus is laying at the bottom of the chalk outline on the pavement below. Paul runs down the stairs to get there. And like Elijah and Elisha in the Old Testament, he throws himself on top of Eutychus's body, grabs him up, and says he's alive. Now they've already picked him up dead. Whoever was down there saw the impact, rushed over, picked him up, and in the words of McCoy, he's dead, Jim. Okay, there's nothing they can do except go through his pocket and look for loose change. There's a little Princess Bride for you too. So he is all the way dead. Paul gets there, throws himself on top, and hugs him up and says, "Nope, he's alive now." Paul gets up, they help Eutychus up, and what do? They go right back upstairs to church. We're not going to let something like a little death and resurrection get in the way of our church service. So they break bread together. There is eating, whether that is the Lord's Supper, because they've held that off until the end, or they're finally ready to take the cover off the covered dishes. For the potluck, but they eat. Eutychus goes home. Everybody's happy. If you want to know about Elijah raising people, that's 1 Kings 17, and Elisha raising the dead is 2 Kings chapter 4. And that is all that I have to say about all of that.
So if Paul just make it because he mooched off of people, does he doesn't have a living.
No, he does have a living. He makes tents, and he has done that in some places.
Oh, that's
Well, we know specifically he's done it in Corinth with Priscilla and Aquila. So he is working and making money. And you would believe that if he's got that skill in Corinth, that if he's going to be someplace for a while, he would do a similar kind of a thing. But he is the beneficiary of a lot of hospitality and gracious, generous people. And in some of these letters to the Corinthians, he talks about their generosity and about his rights as an apostle, somebody who was sent by the Lord, that the ox is worthy of his grain. I think it's the old parable.
My first children were twins, a boy and a girl. I sure wish I would have known the name Secundus. I would have named my son Secundus.
Okay.
And my daughter Firstus.
So when you go through the New Testament, there is this Secundus, but there's also Tertius and Quartus. So that's second, third, and fourth. So you got primo, secundo, tertio, and quarto. Anyway,
That would have covered all.
all right. With that, we will stick a fork in it here until the next time. We'll pick up with Acts chapter 20, verse 13. Paul's getting ready to leave Ephesus, probably for good. And we'll keep on trucking. Okay. Thanks for being here. If you happen to be watching on YouTube or elsewhere, make a comment. Let us know you're alive. Now, wherever you might be. Hopefully, you and your cats and dogs have enjoyed listening as you've been working. We will bring this to a close. Thank you and goodbye.